Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Dr. Huda Amran and I am a house officer at Alexandria Main University Hospital and a Morse schooler too. Today's topic is about what to do with rejection and appeals. Are you the only one who got rejected? Actually, no. Many famous papers got rejected too. For example, the paper describing the Krebs cycle in 1937 was originally submitted to Nature. Hans Krebs got a rejection letter within 5 days. It was later published in another journal called Enzymology. Hans Krebs said, "This was the first time in my career, after having published more than 50 papers, that I had rejection or semi-rejection." So why do journals reject research? Firstly, inappropriate or incomplete statistics, over-interpretation of results, inappropriate or suboptimal instrumentation, sample too small or biased, text difficult to follow, insufficient research question, inaccurate or inconsistent data reported, incomplete or outdated review of literature, insufficient data presented, defective tables or figures. All these are some of the causes of why do journals reject research. So, research doesn't have to be perfect actually. Bordage back in 201 noted that reviewers were pleased to see when the authors acknowledged the limitations of their studies. Reviewers emphasized the importance of researchers acknowledging the limitation of their studies rather than ignoring these deficiencies. An honest approach to design and results in scientific writing, as noted by some reviewers, is likely to increase one's chance of being published. Researchers need to make a conscious effort to identify possible biases and confounding variables, both during the design phase of the study and once the results are in. Researchers should ask themselves, what are the competing hypotheses or alternative explanation, and to what extent can they be controlled or explained? A study from the Medical Journal of Australia concluded that methodologically strong studies were more likely to be published, but those reporting statistically significant results were no more likely to be published than those without, suggesting that publication bias is not at editorial level. Study results don't have to be positive. The proportion of submitted manuscripts reporting statistically significant results far outnumbered those reporting statistically non-significant results, corroborating previous findings that suggest investigators may fail to submit negative studies. The Lee et al. Study at 206 suggested that studies with statistically significant results are not more likely to be published, regardless of whether they have been peer-reviewed or not. So, the next question is there a bias towards local authors? Study from Lee et al. At 206 found that submitted manuscripts are more likely to be published if they have high methodological quality, randomized controlled trial study design, descriptive or qualitative analytical methods, and disclosure of any funding source, and if the corresponding author lived in the same country as that of the publishing journal. Larger sample size may also increase the chance of acceptance for publication. So what to expect when you get a rejection letter? You may get a rejection and invite resubmission. A rejection letter may invite the author to resubmit the paper with revisions, particularly when the research question being asked is of interest. You may expect an email as follows: "Thank you for sending us your article, which we read with interest. Unfortunately, we don't consider it suitable for publication in its present form. We are, however, interested in the research question. If you felt that the reanalysis suggested below can be done, we would consider a fully revised paper as a new submission. I'm afraid I can't any promises about acceptance, as it would to go through a fresh round of peer and editorial review. We think the conclusions of the paper may well change with the reanalysis. You can get also a rejection immediately, which is called desk rejection. You may expect an email as follows: "We read it with interest, but I regret to say that we have decided not to publish it in the PMG. Upon consideration, we believe this manuscript would be better suited for a journal with a global health or infectious disease focus if the paper was about global health or infectious disease focus. We receive over 8,000 submissions a year and accept less than 10%. We do therefore have to make hard decisions on just how interesting an article will be to our general clinical readers, how much it adds, and how much practical value it will be. I hope the outcome of this specific submission will not discourage you from submitting manuscripts in the future." So, what to do after rejection? Is it the end of the road? Actually, no. It can be hard for authors to cope with rejection, but authors should try to get their research published as long as it doesn't have a fatal flaw. Ensure all authors of the paper know about the rejection and are ready to work together on preparation for the next journal. Carefully consider all feedback from editors and reviewers. Use constructive comments to revise and improve the paper. Do this in line with scope and requirements of next journal. Some of suggested revisions may not be relevant or necessary for the next journal. In the cover letter for the next journal, mention that the paper has been revised following peer review and rejection. So we will discuss a bit more about reasons of rejection. One of the most common causes is that the out of scope for journal readership. The paper and subject may be out of scope and therefore not suitable to the readers of the journal. This is often the editor's stated reason for rejecting a manuscript immediately, without external peer review and without further feedback. Consider rewriting the paper's introduction, abstract, and cover letter for the next journal to better explain the importance, relevance, and originality of the research question. A second cause is study design was inadequate. If the journal rejected the paper because of limitation in the study designs, concluding that it wasn't strong enough for the journal, there is an opportunity to review and address this part of the article. So, you have to rewrite and clarify methods and results, rewrite discussion to more critically appraise all the study limitations and identify any lessons. Consider conducting appropriate further analysis, particularly if suggested by reviewers and statisticians. Add this to the methods, results, and abstract of the revised paper and interpret them in the discussion. Clearly identify analyses that were not pre-specified. Another cause for rejection is that the study results were negative. It's important for studies with negative finding to be published. Why? To ensure the body of research literature is not biased. Editors should try to avoid publication bias and should differentiate clearly between evidence of absence and absence of evidence, where evidence of absence means that reliable finding of no effect or no association. In this case, many journals will publish this, but absence of evidence is inconclusive results, more likely to be rejected from high-impact journals. Either way, authors should rewrite the results, discussion, abstract, and discuss study limitation and lessons, and try submitting to a lower-impact journal or less selective mega-journal. With perseverance, the article will be published somewhere eventually. So let's discuss what about waste and bias in publication. Waste happen at 4 stages of research. First stage, questions relevant to clinician and patients. Is it? Low priority questions addressed, important outcome not assessed. clinicians and patients not involved in setting research agendas. Second stage is appropriate design and method. Over 50% studies designed without reference to systematic reviews of existing evidence. Over 50% of studies fail to take adequate steps to reduce biases. Third stage is accessible full publication. Over 50% of studies never published in full. Biased underreporting of studies with disappointing results. Fourth stage is unbiased and usable report. Over 30% of trial intervention not sufficiently described. Over 50% of planned study outcome not reported. Most new research not interpreted in the context of systematic assessment of other relevant evidence. So 85% research waste may lead to enormous financial loss, over $100 billion per year. What about publication bias? Publication bias is actually a wasteful practice. A meta-analysis of studies from 2009 looked at the extension of publication bias and the reasons for it. It concluded that publication bias is defined as the tendency on the part of investigators, reviewers, and editors to submit or accept manuscript for publication based on the direction or strength of the study findings. A second problem is that authors are not submitting the papers. The study confirmed what other studies have shown, that one of the biggest problems is that studies do not get submitted. The observation that many studies are never published was termed the file drawer problem by Rosenthal in 1979. If the published studies comprise a biased sample of all studies that have been conducted, the results of a literature review will be misleading. For example, the efficacy of treatment will be exaggerated if studies with positive results are more likely to be published than those with negative results. So, how to tackle non-submission? The author of this meta-analysis concluded that all funded or approved studies should be prospectively registered, and these registers should be publicly accessible. Regulatory authorities should also provide publicly accessible databases of all studies received from pharmaceutical industry. Investigators should be encouraged and supported to present their studies at conferences. So our next question is when to appeal against rejection. We will outline the BMJ's policy. If you believe that your article has been rejected unfairly, perhaps because its scientific content has been misunderstood, please submit an appeal letter via your author center on the journal's online submission system. Do not try to submit a revised version of your article at this stage. Appeals must be submitted within 30 days of rejection decision. Appeal will only be considered if all specific points of reviewers' and editors' comments are addressed in the rebuttal letter. Decisions will be only reversed if the authors are convinced that the decision was a serious mistake, or if the reviewers made an error of fact or showed evidence of bias. Appeals against editorial fit or the journal not being the right journal for the article will not be considered. If the thought that the appeal is warranted, the article, reviewers' comments, and author's response will be reviewed internally by the editorial team. The editor will decide whether to invite a resubmission, send it to another external reviewer, or uphold the original decision. In all cases, the editor decision is final. All appeals will be discussed with at least one other editor. If those editors do not agree, the appeal will be discussed at a full editorial meeting. We may or may not then seek external advice on the appeal. We do not consider second appeal. This is plus medicine. So, last thing you are going to talk about is journal transfer service. Here is an outline of the BMG transfer service. We now ask every author to choose an alternative journal when they first submit their paper. If your paper is rejected by an editor, the paper will be transferred automatically to your second journal, along with all related files and any peer reviews. BMG journal editors are also encouraged to suggest a more appropriate journal for research they cannot accept in their own journal. These changes can save author time and reduces disappointment. So what are the benefits of journal transfer service? Actually, it depends on the author's choice and author's control, where they decide what is the next journal to be transferred to. It also saves time for the authors. It improves the acceptance rate, as the most common cause of rejection is out of school papers, so it will be transferred to another relevant journal, which improves acceptance rate. No need to resubmit again, as all files will be automatically submitted to the next journal. So it saves everyone's time. And finally, I want to thank you all for listening to this lecture, and special thanks to Mars for giving me this opportunity to share knowledge with you all, and special thanks to Nuran Hamza for this scholarship. And please follow Mars different platforms on social media. And thank you.